Before the smoke, before the sirens, before the towers fell, there was silence. It was Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. The sun rose over the eastern seaboard like any other day. A late summer morning, clear skies, no wind, no warning. In New York City, the streets stirred early. Taxi horns echoed between buildings. Coffee carts steamed on corners. Subway trains rumbled beneath the pavement. The city was alive, unaware of what was coming. At 5:45 a.m., two men boarded a small commuter flight in Portland, Maine. They were headed to Boston. From there, they would connect to American Airlines Flight 11. Their names, Mohammed Atta and Abdulaziz Al-Amari. They carried small bags, they blended in. Elsewhere, in hotel rooms and apartments, other men prepared. They shaved. They prayed. They dressed in ordinary clothes. They looked like businessmen, students, travelers. They were not. At 6 a.m., the first commuters entered the subway. Wall Street traders, office assistants, tourists. The Twin Towers stood tall above them, 110 stories of steel and glass, symbols of commerce, ambition, and American might. At 6:30 a.m., Logan International Airport buzzed with activity, check-in lines, security gates. 4 flights were scheduled to depart that morning, all bound for California. All 4 would never arrive. At 6:45 a.m., the sun climbed higher. Its light reflected off the Hudson River. Joggers passed beneath the towers. Vendors opened their stalls. Routine, repetition, normalcy. At 7 a.m., inside the towers, janitors finished their shifts. Executives reviewed morning reports. Secretaries brewed coffee. Elevators ascended and descended in quiet rhythm. The buildings breathed with life. At 7:15 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 began boarding. 92 people. Among them, 5 hijackers. They took their seats. They waited. At 7:30 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 prepared for departure. 65 people. 5 more hijackers. Another Boeing 767. Another plan already in motion. At 7:40 a.m., the streets of Manhattan filled with sound. Delivery trucks, radio chatter. Children walked to school. Businessmen checked their watches. The city moved forward, minute by minute. At 7:45 a.m., Flight 11 taxied to the runway. The sky was clear. The air was calm. The plane lifted off at 7:59 a.m. Its destination, Los Angeles. Its fate, already sealed. At 8:14 a.m., United Flight 175 took off. Another westbound flight. Another Boeing 767. Another hijacking already underway. At 8:20 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 departed from Washington, Dulles. 64 people on board. 5 hijackers. Its target not yet known. At 8:42 a.m., United Flight 93 left Newark Airport. 44 people. 4 hijackers. Its journey would end in a field in Pennsylvania. By 8:45 a.m., all 4 planes were in the air. All 4 had been hijacked. None of the passengers knew what was coming. Not yet. In lower Manhattan, the towers stood untouched. The morning sun bathed them in gold. Tourists took photos. Office workers typed emails. Phones rang. Coffee brewed. The city breathed. And then, at 8:46 a.m., the silence. 8:46 a.m., the moment everything changed. American Airlines Flight 11 struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Floors 93 to 99 were obliterated. A fireball erupted. Debris rained down. Smoke filled the sky. The city paused. Inside chaos, walls cracked, ceilings collapsed. People screamed. Some ran. Others were trapped. Elevators froze. Phones stopped working. On the streets, heads turned upward. A plane had flown too low, too fast, too deliberate. Pedestrians froze, some screamed, others stared in silence. At 8:47, 911 calls flooded in. Explosion at the World Trade Center. Something hit the building. People are falling. Newsrooms scrambled. Anchors searched for words. Was it a bomb? An accident? No one knew. At 8:50, sirens echoed. Fire trucks raced downtown. Police blocked intersections. Paramedics prepared. They didn't know what awaited them. Inside the tower, stairwells filled. Smoke thickened. People descended. Some helped strangers. Some prayed. Some called loved ones. At 8:55, President Bush was told, a plane hit the World Trade Center. He assumed it was an accident. He stayed seated. At 8:58, United Flight 175 changed course. It descended rapidly, heading straight for Manhattan. Air traffic controllers noticed. They tried to make contact. No response. Another silence. At 9:03, Flight 175 struck the South Tower. Floors 77 to 85. Another explosion. Captured live. Millions watched in horror. Now there was no doubt. This was an attack. Inside the South Tower, panic. People ran. Some fell. Others helped. The stairwells filled again. At 9:05, Bush was told, a second plane hit. He remained seated. 7 more minutes. At 9:10, the FAA began grounding flights. Airports scrambled. Pilots were told to land. At 9:15, firefighters climbed. They carried hoses, axes, oxygen. They didn't hesitate. They didn't turn back. At 9:20, the South Tower burned hotter. Steel weakened. Floors sagged. Walls cracked. On the 84th floor, Teresa called her sister. "I'm okay," she said. "I'm above the fire." Her sister cried. Teresa stayed calm. She didn't know the building was failing. At 9:25, all flights were grounded nationwide. The skies emptied. Control towers buzzed. Airports filled with confusion. At 9:30, Bush addressed the nation. "Today we've had a national tragedy." His voice was steady. The nation trembled. At 9:35, Flight 77 approached Washington. Hijackers had taken control. The plane descended rapidly. Its target, the Pentagon. At 9:37, Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. 5 stories collapsed. Smoke rose over Washington. The Capitol was under attack. At 9:40, Flight 93 was still in the air. Passengers knew. They planned to fight back. At 9:45, the White House was evacuated. Air Force One lifted off. Fighter jets scrambled. At 9:50, the South Tower groaned. Steel buckled. Floors collapsed inward. The building began to fall. At 9:59, the South Tower collapsed, floor by floor. A cloud of dust engulfed the streets. People ran. Some were buried. Others emerged, covered in ash. The skyline was changed. 10 a.m., the South Tower was gone. A cloud of dust swept through Manhattan. Ash covered cars, windows, people. The streets turned gray. The skyline was broken. Inside the North Tower, confusion. Many didn't know the South Tower had collapsed. There was no announcement, only silence, only smoke. Firefighters kept climbing, floor by floor. They radioed back. "We're still going." They didn't know time was running out. On the ground, panic spread. People ran from the dust. Some fell. Others helped. Shoes were lost. Faces were covered in soot. At 10:05, emergency crews regrouped. They searched for survivors. They called out names. They found no answers. Inside the tower, stairwells were packed. People moved slowly. Some carried others. Some stopped to rest. The air was thick, the heat unbearable. At 10:10, the building groaned. Steel strained. Floors shifted. The structure was failing. On the 104th floor, a man named David called his wife. "I'm still here," he said. "I'm trying to get down." She cried. He stayed calm. He didn't know the tower was dying. At 10:20, the fire intensified. Glass shattered, walls buckled, the stairwells twisted. Outside, cameras rolled. Reporters whispered, "Something's happening." "Is it falling?" At 10:28 a.m., the North Tower collapsed. 110 stories fell in seconds. Steel, concrete, glass, all turned to dust. A second cloud engulfed the city. People ran again. Some didn't make it. The roar was deafening. Then, silence. The Twin Towers were gone. Thousands were inside. Thousands more watched. At 10:30, the dust settled. The fires burned. The air was toxic. The city was stunned. First responders searched the rubble. They called out. They listened. They hoped. At 10:35, survivors emerged, covered in ash, eyes red, clothes torn. Some walked barefoot, some cried, some didn't speak. At 10:40, hospitals filled. Doctors waited. Stretchers lined hallways. But few arrived. Most were gone. At 10:45, the mayor was briefed. The scale was unimaginable. The towers were gone. The city was wounded. At 10:50, the streets were silent. No horns, no shouting, only sirens, only footsteps. At 11 o'clock, the dust still hung in the air. Photos lay scattered, shoes, phones, badges. The skyline had changed. The world had changed. They ran toward the fire, toward the falling steel, toward the unknown. While others fled, they climbed. While others screamed, they listened. While others froze, they moved. Firefighters, police officers, paramedics, volunteers. At 8:50 a.m., the first units arrived. They looked up. Smoke poured from the North Tower. They didn't hesitate. They entered the building, climbed stairwells, carried gear, helped the injured, gave directions, gave hope. Some reached the 30th floor. Some made it higher. They radioed back. They asked for water. They asked for backup. They never asked to leave. In the South Tower, others followed. They knew the risks. They climbed anyway. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed. Hundreds were inside. Many were first responders. They were lost in seconds. Still, others kept going. Into the North Tower, into the smoke, into the fire. At 10:28 a.m., the North Tower fell. More lives lost, more heroes gone, but not all. Some survived, buried in rubble. They called out. They waited. They believed. Above ground, rescue teams formed. They dug with bare hands. They searched for voices. They pulled out survivors. At 11 a.m., a firefighter named John emerged, covered in ash, eyes red. He had carried 2 people down 40 flights. He collapsed on the sidewalk, then stood up again. A paramedic named Lisa treated dozens. She had no supplies. She used her shirt as bandages. She stayed until nightfall. A police officer named Ramon guided people out. He broke doors, lifted debris. He didn't stop until the tower fell. Civilians helped too. A man named Omar led strangers through smoke. A woman named Grace gave her shoes to someone bleeding. A teenager named Eli carried a child 3 blocks. They didn't know each other. They didn't ask names. They just acted. At 12 p.m., firefighters from other cities arrived. Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore. They came without orders. They came because it was right. At 1 p.m., bucket brigades formed. Lines of people passed debris hand to hand, looking for life, looking for hope. At 2 p.m., a voice was heard. Under steel, under concrete, rescuers dug. They found a man, alive. Cheers erupted. Tears flowed. It was one life, but it meant everything. By evening, hundreds had helped. Some stayed all night. Some never left. They were tired, bleeding, grieving, but they kept going. They were heroes, not because they were strong, but because they chose to.